Hi everyone, welcome back to Walk Wild. My name's Matt and today I'm going to be telling you how to hike the Gower Peninsula Coast Path. I'm also going to be telling you how to wild camp it, and this is an incredible trip and something that I did a week ago in fantastic weather, so I wanted to share it with you, which is also why I'm outside today because it's such a beautiful spring day, so I thought I would just do it out here. So firstly, where to start? The Gower Peninsula is in the southwest of Wales, which is in the UK, and the Gower Peninsula Coast Path is 41 miles long. It runs from Mumbles, which is just outside of Swansea, up around the peninsula, finishes in Crofty. Gower Peninsula is an AONB, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty, and it was one of the first named in the UK. It's not a particularly large area, but it has a wonderfully varied landscape. So you're going to be seeing limestone cliffs, sweeping bays, rugged coastline, salt marshes, sand dunes, inland hills, and even heathland coming all the way up to the edge of the cliffs. So it's a really sublime area of beauty. This trail can be walked in about 3 or 4 days, and it doesn't need to be longer than that, and you get to see all those varied landscapes in a short time, which is really, really special. So my second point is how to get there. You're going to be in quite an isolated area of the country, so it works in two ways. I mean, it's great because it's remote and it's rugged and it's beautiful, but also it's a little hard to get to. The closest transport hub is Swansea, and you can get a train from London or Manchester and many other places throughout England and the UK to get directly to Swansea. There's also a bus terminal inside Swansea city centre, which can be really useful for National Express and Megabus. If you want to fly, you need to go to Cardiff International Airport. If you want to drive, which is what I did, then you're going to need to book a parking space for the weekend. I'll link the ones below that I used. But basically what that means is that you'll park your car and then you'll have to walk around the peninsula, and then you'll have to take a bus back to your car again because it's not a full loop, it's a point-to-point trail. I recommend doing this because the car parks are very strict on the beaches about not staying overnight, and you could get yourself clamped or fined. You know, they really make it clear on all the signposts of the car parks, don't park here and don't park in the lay-bys, so it's better to just book a parking space and be done with it and then not worry about it when you're on your trip. The third point is how to find your way around. This is part of the Welsh Coast Path, which is an 870-mile hiking trail which goes all the way around the outside of Wales, and the Gower Peninsula is just a small section of it. So you're going to be following the signs for the Welsh Coast Path around the peninsula, and the signs are blue and yellow and they have this shell symbol on them. You'll find it really easy to follow these. They're on all the gates and they're on fence stiles, there are signs and all sorts of informative guides throughout the hike which can point you in the direction you need to go, and you don't even really need to use maps. You can just follow the signs for the Welsh Coast Path and obviously keep the sea on one side at all times, and it's pretty hard to get lost. You can use OS maps and I'll link some of those below. I like to use my All Trails app, which I use on my phone, and I download a map before I go and then just follow it along, and it tracks my speed and my distance I've walked, all that kind of thing, info that I'm interested in, but it also shows me where I am on the map. It's worth going to the Welsh Coast Path website, which I'll show you below, because it's got so many resources and details on there which are useful for hiking this trail. Next is where to stay. So as I mentioned, I wild camped. I think this is a perfect place for wild camping, particularly the section between Port Einon and the Worm's Head. There's this lovely empty bit of coastline all the way up there, which is full of headlands and little divots and beautiful places to camp with a coastal view. And then you also see the sunset, which goes down into the sea, so it's really magnificent. There are also some great places. I think you could camp on Rhossili Down, you could probably camp on Rhossili Beach even. The areas up by the sand dunes around Spaniards Rocks. Lots of different places. You've got to be a bit creative with it. It's not a huge national park, so you need to be aware that you don't want to be camping on a farmer's land, you don't want to be camping right on the path. As you know, it's an AONB, not a national park, so you don't have loads of space. So although you can wild camp, it is an endless opportunity, but there are some really great spots and I think you won't have trouble finding them. There are lots of campsites in the area, and there are also camper van sites and holiday lets, so you're not solely limited to wild camping. If you're interested, there are a couple towns that you can stay in which do have B&Bs, and those can be worth it if you aren't quite into wild camping but you still want to enjoy the path, so I recommend checking those out as well. My next point is what to pack. I'm going to start off by talking about shoes, because This is a coast path, and that means you're going to be following a trail, which is quite rocky, it's quite sandy and gravelly, and you're not going to be needing hiking boots. You need hiking trail running shoes, or at least just a good pair of sturdy trainers. The paths are hard, they're compact, they don't get waterlogged, and you want to have something that's sturdy but lightweight and really flexible, and that's going to be trail running shoes. If you wear hiking boots, you will get bad blisters. You may be cursing yourself a little bit when you go on the bits of the beach and the sand, but I think it's still worth having the trail running shoes rather than the boots. Also, because you're on the edge of the Bristol Channel, you're on the edge of a big area of sea with lots of wind and rain coming in, you want to have layers. You want to have a rain jacket, you want to have a down jacket, fleece. It's quite exposed and windy, so you need to be thinking about hats, gloves, wearing a sun cap, sunglasses, sun cream, because although it could be raining 1 minute, it can be really sunny and exposed the next. This is the UK after all, and the weather is quite changeable, especially along that bit of the western coastline. Obviously, for wild camping, you need to be bringing a good tent, something that's quite discreet. You want to bring a sleeping bag, sleeping mats, you're comfy and warm at night, a camp stove. I have a video already that goes into a lot more detail on what my kit list is and how to go wild camping in the UK, so I'm just going to link both of those below and follow that for extra info on how to go wild camping, okay? The next point is what to see. As I mentioned, this is a very varied AONB, incredible landscapes, and one of the main features is the Worm's Head. Now, if you want to visit the Worm's Head, and that's a big thing for you, you need to be aware that it's only accessible at certain times, which is 2.5 hours either side of low tide. So if you want to walk out over the tidal inlet to get onto the Worm's Head, make sure you go at low tide, otherwise, unfortunately, you won't be able to make it there. And that happened to us. We got there and it was high tide and we couldn't cross, but we couldn't do anything about that, and that was okay. We still got a fantastic view. Another really amazing thing is Rosili Beach and Rosili Down. It's a fantastic long sweeping beach with a big hill up on top of it, and then you curl round inland and there's loads of sand dunes which will pile up, and there are wetlands, and there's lots of birds and wildlife trusts and loads of nature reserves. It's all just absolutely sublime. Next up is it safe? With a coast hike, you are always having the slight risk of falling and hurting yourself, and in fact the day we were there we saw someone being heli lifted out from the Worm's Head. They must have fallen, maybe down the cliffs, down the rocks, hurt themselves. We didn't really know, but we saw the helicopter evacuation coming in. So you need to be careful when you're on these coast paths, and it's really steep and crumbling, but luckily the Welsh Coast Path, they do maintain and monitor everything, and so we actually had a path diversion at one point because there was a landslip, so they are aware that these can be a bit precarious and they want to make it as safe as possible. So just have your wits about you, don't get too close to the edge, don't camp right on the edge, and you'll enjoy your trip, I'm sure. You also need to be aware of the tides, as I mentioned. Don't go walking out to the Worm's Head and then getting cut off at the wrong tide, because you'll be stranded, and that's just, either not fun for you or not fun for the people who have to come and collect you. So those are just a couple points to bear in mind. The next point is food and drink. We had a bit of a tough time filling up water. Not too bad, because there were some spots along the way, which I'll link below, where usually you can get refreshments from cafes, beach cafes generally, that kind of thing. But it wasn't very abundant with water taps. The Worm's Head had a free water tap that we could use, but other than that we had to fill up in cafes and that kind of thing. So you want to bear that in mind before you go on your trip, so you know exactly where to fill up. And lastly are my bonus tips. So I think you can tell I've mentioned this quite a few times, but I think the tides are something that you really want to make note of. Before you leave, note down which areas are at low tide and which are at high tide, because the trail does vary. And like I said, the Worm's Head, note down when low tide is and time you'll hike so you're there at the right time. There are lots of trails that have a high tide and a low tide mark, which is fine. You can walk either of them, and we walked a bit of a mix of both, and they were equally as gorgeous, so it wasn't like we were missing out, but we were very cautious that if we went on a low tide route, when the tide was in, we could get stuck and you can get in trouble. So that's a tip I think you should be aware of. And the second point is, don't be afraid of diversions. Of course you're going to be following the Welsh Coast Path, but there are lots of times when trails split, when they go up on top of a dune, sometimes they go down onto a beach. As I said, there's a high tide and a low tide route. Don't worry too much about following the coast path just exactly, because it generally all ends up in the same place. Sometimes you might think, oh, I want to go up onto Rosilly Down, or actually I'd rather walk along Rosilly Beach. And it's those little decisions you make this trail so special, because there's lots of varied routes, but generally they all go in the same direction. They're all next to the water's edge, and it's pretty easy to find your way around, so don't be afraid of making those little diversions. My final bonus tip is just to plan your transport in advance. So in my travel guide, which I'll link below, I have all the details of how to plan this trip, because it can be a little tricky. You know, the buses aren't as regular as you expect, there aren't as many places to hop on and off as you think there are going to be, and you might get to the end of Crofty and find you have to wait hours before a bus gets there. So if you look at the bus timetables in advance and plan it all out, then you won't have to be worrying about it when you're hiking. It's all sorted for you. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions, just let me know below. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a fantastic hike, and I really want you to have a great time out there too. So let me know what you think, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks.